know where you're from and let us know if you've been on any of our webinars before. We'd like to know what role you have at your school. We'd like to know where you're located so we know who our audience is. If this is your first time to join our webinar series, we'd like to know that as well. As we're waiting for folks to join us, I just want to welcome you to today's webinar. This webinar series is titled Impact Now: How Principals Can Use Video-Enhanced Coaching to Grow Teachers and Raise Student Achievement. Today is the eighth part of a 9-part webinar series, and today's webinar is titled The Value of Video Through the Lens of the Administrator. And I really should have said through the lens of the administrator/coach, because that's really the wearing two hats today as the administrators from Franconia join us. And I see some folks have entered into the chat. Welcome, Justin. And we have some folks who are excited to hear from our participants in today's webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by SIBME and the Principal Center. While we're waiting for folks to join us, I do want to carry on a little bit here and talk to you a little bit about what SIBME is. SIBME is an acronym that stands for Seeing is Believing Me. And we believe at SIBME whenever we use video as part of our professional learning practice, whether it's through self-reflection or whether it's through coaching or collaboration, that we're going to improve our practices more easily and more steadily than we would if we hadn't used video. So what is SIBME? We're a technology platform to enhance professional learning. And we believe we have a really wonderful workflow that helps folks to see the value of using video for their own professional learning. We're also a professional service provider, so we know that the technology alone doesn't guarantee success, and we also therefore provide workshops and webinars to help folks get up to speed very quickly whenever they're using the technology of the platform, and also to help them shape their plan and purpose for using video. And finally, we're a virtual coaching provider for folks who don't have the bandwidth. In other words, they don't have the coaching staff that can power coaching on their own campus. So we have a cohort of coaches from all over the country who work for us and with us in a 6-week coaching cycle for those schools that see the value in having their teachers coached but don't have the manpower to do it. So if this is your first time to join us, or if you've joined us before, we'd like to hear from you in the chat. Let us know if you've been on any of the previous webinars. That helps us to know how much background we need to build as we work through today's objectives. We also have posted here a link for you. So if you haven't been able to visit us in any of the previous webinars, we have those recorded, and you can access those through the link that I'm showing you right now on the screen. It's really important for you to build some foundation and background, and these webinars, the previous 7 webinars have been really packed with useful information for you as you get started with using video as part of your path for professional development. We're having Andrea's joining us. Thanks for joining us, Andrea, and letting us know that you're with us. And once again, that link is really important. I think the last 2 webinars for me would be of great value for you. Webinar 6, where we looked at through the lens of the instructional coach at this whole process, and then webinar 7, where we looked at this process through the lens of teachers. So I do want to say that this is a 9-part webinar series. We are on webinar 8. The intention of this webinar series was to help those instructional leaders who wanted to implement video during the 2017-2018 school year. And of course, we can also start looking forward and ahead to next school year as well. The goal was that each webinar would help to give you the information that you needed and the homework that you would need to do in the coming months as you prepared to implement this across your school or within your school. So that's been the intent of the 9-part webinar series. And I do want to check in with the chat because we have some folks who are joining us. Again, thank y'all for joining us. And I think, are ready to go ahead and get started with our content My name is Allison Burnett. I am the facilitator of the webinar series. I am also the director of professional learning and virtual coaching for SIBME. I have a background in education. I call myself a lifer. So 20 years in the classroom, 10 years as an instructional leader, and then I began working as an educational consultant. So here I am, more than full-time, I like to say, as working with SIBME. And one of my other passions is working as an adjunct professor at a local university here in the Houston area, where I work with students who are on the path to becoming teachers. I want to introduce you to today's featured presenter, and that's Dr. Tonya Goree. I'm going to say a few things about Dr. Goree and ask her to supplement what I say, but Dr. Goree has more than 26 years of experience in education and educational leadership. She was the 2015-16 Elementary Principal of the Year in Sci-Fair, and that's saying a lot, given the fact they have a lot of schools in Sci-Fair, over 90 schools in total, and as you know, usually lots more elementary in that process. I also want to say that Dr. Goree was a featured speaker at the 2017 ASCD conference in Anaheim, California, and at the National Principal Conference in Philadelphia this past summer. Standing room only at those conferences, and it's always exciting and wonderful to hear Dr. Goree speak and to work with her as well. I learn something every single time, and I think one of my favorite ways of looking at Dr. Goree is that she really is excellence. And I will say that there is no shortcut to excellence, but there is a plan and a process, and Dr. Goree has been sharing that with us and will continue to share that with us today. Dr. Goree, would you like to add anything to your introduction?
Oh, sure. Just that in my 26 plus years as an educator, more than half of those years have been as a building or as an administrator. I've had the pleasure of being the principal of 2 separate buildings, and both buildings used video enhanced coaching to improve instruction. I have been quoted by saying that in my years of experience, nothing has had a greater impact on improving instruction like video enhanced coaching. So I am happy to be here today and very happy to share my 2 assistant principals with all the panelists who will share a wealth of knowledge and their experience using this video coaching process.
Thank you, Dr. Goree. So let's go ahead and meet our guests today. Melissa, would you introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure. My name is Melissa Martin, and I'm the assistant principal here at Francone, and I've been here for about 5 years. Prior to that, I wrote curriculum for some of the after-school programs in our district, and I've been in education for about 12 years.
Thank you. And Lydia, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Lydia McGee, and I am one of the assistant principals here at Francone Elementary. I have 20 years of experience in education. This is my first year here at Francone as an assistant principal. Prior to that, I was in Corpus Christi as an assistant principal, and then prior to that, I was with Dr. Goree at Lee Elementary for 4 years, 2 as a teacher and then 2 as a science instructional specialist.
Thanks, Lydia. You know, you have a really interesting perspective, and I want to just take a moment to explore that briefly. And that is, so you were with Dr. Goree as a teacher and an instructional specialist many years ago, and you at that time y'all were using video for coaching as well, but you were using flip cams, and then you left, you go to Corpus Christi, you come back, you're assistant principal now at Francone, and when you come back into Sci-Fair and back to working with Dr. Goree, you realize that we're still using video, but we're doing it a little bit differently. So could you just talk briefly about what that felt like, the difference between flip cams and SIBME?
Yes. When we were at Lee, we used camcorders to record or to capture our video. And so our camcorders would then either have to be connected directly to our laptop to upload our video, or we could take the SD card out. If our laptop was new enough to have an SD slot, we could, capture the video that way. At that point, once we saved it on our desktop, then we were able to share it with our teachers through our campus shared drive. Now, the campus shared drive was not exclusive to just that one teacher, so anyone could then access it at that time. So then we would email the teacher and let them know that their video was available for download. The teacher would then download it to their desktop and delete it from the shared drive if they didn't want anyone else to see it. At that point, The teacher and the coach in separate areas would then review the video and use a worksheet that was somewhat like a timeline to indicate where they wanted to talk or discuss high points of the lesson, areas for growth. And then we come back together as our post-conference. And at that moment, we open the video and the teacher might say, can we go to 5 minutes and 2 seconds? Let's discuss something that I want to see there. So then we'd have to watch that snippet of the video so we could then discuss it. So uploading was difficult, discussing it was just difficult, as well as securing it was difficult. With the SIBME platform, I can upload my video within 30 seconds and share it in a huddle to my teacher, and it goes to only the individual that I intend to receive it. At that point, we can both simultaneously begin to share our feedback from the video. The teacher is then able to comment on things that questions I may ask. I can tag it. We have 3 different tags. We have our questions, our ideas, and then our bright spots. And so I can tag it and they can respond to what I'm seeing, and they can also give comments that they want me to follow up on. So it changes the dynamic for our post-conference. We're no longer looking at what did you see, we're looking at what do we want to do next. So SIBME is a more effective and efficient way for us to do video coaching.
So I just have to say 2 things. The first thing is, when you were talking about the steps you had to take back when you were using the camcorder, I'm exhausted. That was a lot of work. And the second thing is, I just have to say also, whenever SIBME was presenting and Dr. Goree was first hearing about the platform, I can't even imagine how excited you must have been.
Yes,
but
very excited.
You found the value in video, and you were willing to do the work even before it became a lot simpler with the video platform. So thanks for sharing those memories, those fun memories. So Dr. Goree, if you would please, and I'm noticing that some of the folks who are joining us today haven't been able to see the previous webinar, so it's a great opportunity to revisit some of the big objectives or the big rocks that we've covered along the way. And if you have joined us for previous webinars, it's always great to have a little bit of repetition, and hearing something a second time never hurts. So Dr. Goree, would you take us through those big objectives from the previous webinars?
Absolutely. Webinar 1, we focused on determining why a campus would want to use video enhanced coaching. We talked about calibrating the team and, most importantly, capitalizing on that one opportunity to introduce this process, build it into your culture, and take advantage of capturing your staff's buy-in to this process. Webinar 2, we added the importance of self-reflection. I believe self-reflection is one of the greatest forms of professional growth. We talked about what happens when perception meets reality, and the overall way that the SIBME platform helps to support the video coaching process. Webinar 3 discussed the value of the pre-video conference, and while you're moving into cycle 2, we took a very specific look again at some of the features of the platform and how that would support that video coaching process. Webinar 4 showcased one of my favorite features that Ms. McGee talked about, the time-stamped feedback and the custom marker tags. Definitely one of my favorite features of the platform. We also talked about how we shared how that the timestamp comments help us when it comes to the post-video conference and that face-to-face opportunity. We sit down, we've heard feedback, the teachers have heard feedback from us, and we've also gotten an opportunity to review their comments. And so that's a feature that helps us during post-video conference. Webinar 5, emphasis was placed on the differences between teacher-selected goals and coach-selected goals. Also, the value of using sync notes, being able to scribe electronically while capturing video in the classroom. Webinar 6, an opportunity to hear from our instructional specialists. The viewers were able to listen to their perspective as to how they use the different features of video coaching, the different features of the SIBME platform, how they use it for PLCs, and how it just helps develop their particular content area. Webinar 7, 2 classroom teachers provided insight into the entire video coaching process. How did they feel when they heard that we were going to video coach as an entire campus? How do they use they talked about how they use the video library as well. And most importantly, they gave their perspective on the separation of coaching and evaluation.
Very good. So today we're excited for our objectives in webinar 8. And those objectives include really looking at that trust factor again, and really hearing from your assistant principals in terms of the steps you took when you first spoke with the faculty to build trust, and those ongoing steps you take to build trust. And one of those happens when we separate the role of the evaluator from the role of the coach. Today, I'm also excited for us to really hear more about that calibration aspect of calibrating the coaches, making sure they're sharing the same philosophy and the same language. And then we're going to look through the lens of the administrators/coaches through those cycles of self-reflection. That's cycle 1 through cycle 2, where we have the teacher selecting the goal they want to work on, in cycle 3 where the coach selects it. And then finally, listening to some of the important value that we find in video beyond the use of video for coaching. So let's go ahead and get started with objective number 1. And objective number 1 really is that objective of trust. And let's go ahead and for objective number 1, let's go ahead and start with Melissa. So for objective number 1, and talking about the trust that we build and so forth, I want you to take us back, and I always enjoy doing this from the perspective of the teachers and from the perspective of the instructional specialists, and now from the perspective of the assistant principals, back to that day about 3 years or so ago when Dr. Goree was new to Francone. You'd been at Francone as an assistant principal for a couple of years at that point, and she comes in, imagine, to that cafeteria on her first day of a faculty meeting with the full faculty, and she's introducing herself, and she's introducing her objectives and her goals and her plans, and she's saying that we're going to use video as part of the way we coach in this building. Take us back to that day and talk to us about your impression of that message and how that message really played into the role of building trust.
Well, I think that, anytime there's a change in school leadership, there's some uncertainty there. Teachers are eager to hear the vision. They want to know, what does this person represent? What are they bringing to our campus? And they're kind of bracing themselves for change. And a large part of what Dr. Goree shared centered around improving our academic performance to meet the needs of our students. And video coaching was rolled out as a component of that. And so I think because it was laid out on the table and as a way to address what we needed to do for our kids, people received it. And there wasn't a lot of questioning at that time or in that moment regarding the process, at least out loud. But as a whole, people took what was shared and said, okay, this is what we need to do for our kids.
Very nice. So that message then, that first message, and Dr. Goree calls that her one shot, was an important moment in terms of building trust, and as Dr. Goree would say, the why of that. Lydia, you weren't there at that time. You had been in Corpus at that time, but back this year, do you have any thoughts about the role that trust plays in this process?
Yes. If you do not truly know your teachers, then you can't gain their trust, learn their strengths, or build their true full potential. So as a leader, you must take the time to frequently spend time in the classroom and then build relationships with your staff. One way that I found really effective in building trust for teachers in the coaching role is to learn how they receive feedback. So you need to know, is this a person who needs immediate feedback? Do I need to write a sticky and leave something? Or do I need to wait because they prefer face-to-face dialogue? So I would say take the time to be intentional about learning your staff and how they receive feedback so that they will be receptive to your feedback, and that will build more trust.
Thank you. Dr. Goree, is there anything you want to add to what the assistant principals have said about the impact and importance of trust?
Well, just that consistency builds trust. So being purposeful about what we're doing. Video coaching wasn't introduced as an initiative. It was introduced as being a part of our culture. And we have not wavered in the way that we have proceeded with it being a part of our culture. And that helps build the trust factor.
Absolutely. And I like how you said that it's not one more thing, or it's not an initiative. It's just part of the way we part of our culture, the part of the way we do things. So let's take a pause here and see if anybody wants to ask any questions in the chat regarding objective 1, the all-important objective of building that sense of trust before we get started using video. And if not, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and proceed to our next objective, objective 2, which is to learn how and why Frank Cohn separates the role of the coach from the role of the evaluator. And this also plays into that factor of trust quite a bit. So Lydia, let's start with you this time. Talk to us about that separation.
Sure. So the role of the coach and the evaluator has to be clearly defined and known by the teacher, the coach, and the administrator. Our model allows that for administrators to be coaches for some and evaluators for others. So that seemingly dual role that it seems that we play has to be delineated. So the role of the coach is to provide non-judgmental, objective feedback in the form of prompting questions that promote self-reflection. At times, the coach has to give directives to unaware teachers, but the overall arching goal of coaching is to build awareness of effective instruction and the skills to adjust when needed. Thus, it's going to ensure quality instruction and develop the teacher professionally. The goal for evaluation is to evaluate the attainment of instructional goals that are set at the beginning of the year by the teacher and the evaluator at the beginning of the year or the middle of the year goal-setting conferences. So the appraiser evaluates the quality assurance and the professional development. Those are the same 2 areas that the coach is focusing on. So although the coach and the evaluator have formative components, it's the evaluator's summative that holds the accountability measure that demonstrates a teacher's attainment of certain professional standards. That's not present in the coach's role. So there are 2 reasons why I think that defining these roles is important. One is because we believe that all teachers want to do their best. Just like in any other profession, if you know that your shortcomings are going to be evaluated, then you're not so likely to let them be exposed. But when you have a coach, you're able to be vulnerable with that coach, knowing that you can try some things and experiment with instructional strategies and perfect them before the end of the evaluation process. And so they're able to communicate and be more open with their coach because there is no detriment in allowing for your shortcomings or your weaknesses to be seen. The second reason that I think it's important is because you yourself have to know the true role as a coach and how to navigate through the coaching of differentiated levels for teachers' reflection. And if you know the role, then you can gain the trust of the teachers and thus gain the trust in the process of coaching through video.
Thank you. So, Melissa, do you want to add anything to what Lydia said in terms of the separation and the importance of that separation?
Just speaking specifically regarding the role of an assistant principal, so much, the nature of our job, so much of it is corrective feedback. Making sure everyone's in dress code and that everything is timely and making sure all the procedures are being followed. And video coaching was a way to bring instruction back to the forefront of what we do. It provided structured opportunities for us to sit down and talk to teachers about curriculum and instruction, which is something that, we all wish we had more time for.
Yeah, that's great. And so, Dr. Goree, anything you want to add to what your assistant principals have said about the importance of separating the role of the coach from the evaluator?
It was introduced to the teachers that way, that their coach would not be their evaluator, and to build that trust factor, we stay consistent with that. And because it is, the teacher's more comfortable talking to the coach versus the evaluator because they know the sole purpose of coaching, we say this all the time, the sole purpose of coaching is for professional growth.
Okay. So we do have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to share those with you. And this first question really, Lydia, is really, they're asking you to explain one more time. So you gave that explanation, the initial explanation of the role of the coach. And so can you review that again, how just that explanation of what the role of the coach is?
So the role of the coach is really to come alongside the teacher, and depending on where the teacher is in the continuum of self-reflection, you're either going to be their cheerleader, like give them the unconditional support that they need, or you're going to be their collaborator, which is the refinement teacher. There's a book that I know is in the resource. It is Building Teachers' Capacity for Success by Pete Hall and Alyssa Cimarol, and that helps to show you the differentiation between the coach's role and the administrator's role, and how to coach in each stage of the continuum for self-reflection. So as a coach, you're either being super supportive and telling them, you can do it, and here's how. For the unaware teacher, or for the refinement teacher, you are saying, okay, you know how to do this. How can I push you more into leadership roles? But it's never to evaluate them. It is always to help to build them from where they are to the next level on the continuum. So as an evaluator, the goal of evaluation is still the same. Because you met with the teacher, you already know where their professional goals are for their professional development growth, and you also know what their instructional goals are. So you are looking for the assurance that they are meeting those goals. And because we have a coaching model, we know that our coaches are in there ensuring that the teachers are meeting those goals for instructional strategies, improving instruction and instructional delivery. So as we evaluate our teachers, there's that summative. So everyone knows that no matter how you tell them your evaluation is not punitive, they still feel, I'm being graded. You're going to give me a grade at the end of this. So for the evaluator, you do have that summative piece that evaluates a teacher meeting the state standards, so that as a district or as a campus as a whole, you're able to say, we have teachers that are attaining satisfactory levels of instructional strategy, using instructional strategies.
Thank you. We do have one more question in the chat. Dr. Goree, I'm gonna toss this one to you, and then you can decide if you want to take it or if you want to have one of the APs answer it. So the question is, I'm not sure if I understood correctly. One person may act as a coach for some teachers and an evaluator of other teachers.
So we have the pleasure of having 9 coaches set up by design. And 4 of those coaches are administrators. So as an administrator, if I am the teacher's evaluator for the year, I do not coach that teacher. Our instructional specialists will coach teachers that, or another assistant principal will coach a teacher that will evaluate a teacher or coach a teacher that's on my list. I do not evaluate anyone in that particular year. The next school year, that teacher may be on my list of teachers to evaluate. Then I am not that teacher's coach. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, I think that takes care of it. Thank you. So let's go ahead and move to objective 3, which is really one of the objectives I'm most excited about today, and that is understanding the importance of calibrating the coaches. So I know that we've mentioned in previous webinars that that's one of the things that we do as the year begins, and it's really something that as the teachers are in that self-reflective cycle, that gives the administrators some time to work on that calibration component. And I think that maybe evolves and changes over the years as to what you're going to focus on during that calibration portion of the work that you do. But I think I'd like, Dr. Goree, for you to start us off this time and talk to us about that, the importance of calibrating and how you go about doing it.
Well, anything that's important, you plan and you prepare for it. And that's what calibration is for us. It's an opportunity to align our goals and make sure that we are providing that consistency in the coaching process. Research says that there's a positive impact on consistency and trust. If things are consistent, then employees are more likely to trust the process. Well, calibrating allows us to have that consistency. We want our teachers to trust the video coaching process. We want them to trust that their instructional practices will improve through the support of their instructional coach. So we have to calibrate. At Francone, calibration is based on either the needs of the coaches, or we choose an area that we want to focus on to improve our coaching practices. We've done book studies. We've taken a look at or had someone come in and talk to us about providing better feedback. just whatever area we believe we need to improve on. That's what we use for calibration. It looks different from year to year because it is based on where we are as coaches and what is our campus initiative. What are our campus goals? And that's what we calibrate to make sure we're aligned with. Coaches have different perspectives and different experiences, which leaves room for personal interpretation of the process. But if you calibrate, you can ensure that all coaches are aligned to the campus instructional goals.
Thank you. Melissa, Lydia, do you want to add anything to what Dr. Goree said about the calibration process?
Just that we're transparent with the staff as well. You know, we do campus-wide book studies as part of our staff meetings, and a lot of our feedback is in response or in collaboration with whatever the book study is that we're doing. So it really is about transparency and open communication when it comes to feedback and coaching.
Lydia?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. And so this year's focus, Dr. Goree, and forgive me if but this year's focus on calibration, y'all really focused in on feedback, right?
Correct. Better feedback for better coaching.
Yeah. Very nice. So I want folks to understand who are listening to us today that this is an important step, not a step to be skipped. So when we start talking with principals who are excited about using video, they're interested in seeing a calendar of how, when do we begin the coaching cycles? And I really think it's important for them to understand that the preparation for the coach is as important as thinking of your timeline for when those coaching cycles are going to begin. So if we have coaches who are aligned, as you use the word aligned, they're sharing the same philosophy and sometimes the same language, and they've read the same books, and they've had the opportunity to have some deep conversations around it, I think that they're going to be seen as more credible, and the feedback they provide is going to be more valuable. So before we go, before we go to the next objective, we do have a follow-up question, and I think this really continues to relate back to objective 3. We're still thinking about that separation of evaluator from coach, and I'm going to read the question to you, and Dr. Goree, I'm going to ask you to either answer it or hand that off, but here's what we have is, I wonder whether that crossover leads to any reticence on the part of the staff at all, even if they know the person may be coaching them at one point, as they are also an evaluator and may evaluate them in the future. May that not lead to them being less willing to show their weak areas fully?
I will tell you, we have not experienced that because of the relationship that has been established. I, as an evaluator, and my 2 APs are here, 2 of my 3 APs are here today, can tell you that I don't go to them about anything related to a teacher that I'm evaluating if they are the coach. We keep it separate. We don't have discussions about it. It is strictly for growth. And if video enhanced coaching is used properly, then the teacher improves. So if I become their evaluator next year, they're better at whatever it is, whatever goals they set to work on because of this process. So there's never a fear of what's going to happen in the future because they improve. Instructional practices have improved through this process. So there's no fear that there will be any negative repercussions if I become their evaluator, or if I'm their coach one year and their evaluator the next year. It has worked very well, very successfully with our staff.
Thank you. So let's take a pause and see if anybody has any questions about calibration before we move on to the 4th objective. If you have a question about the calibration process, and we do have a question in the chat, just someone saying, great point about the growth, Dr. Goree, and the separation. And the person who asked the question is saying, yeah, they see the importance of strong and open leadership. That's the key to this being effective. Very good. So we're going to go forward with objective 4. And objective 4 is understanding what coaching cycle 1 is about. And we're looking at coaching cycle 1 through the lens of the administrator/coach and the value they find in that part of the process, which is teacher self-reflection. So in terms of this objective, before we get actually to talking about specifically about the process and procedures of cycle 1, I do want to talk and show this slide, which is a timeline for implementation of those cycles. And Dr. Goree, would you walk us through? Now, I know this was not this year's timeline. We had Hurricane Harvey, and we had some ice days, and a little unusual beginning to the year. But in general, this could be the timeline that you would normally follow. Would you walk us through this?
Absolutely. Our timeline starts the first day of school because our staff is accustomed to the video coaching process. So from the first day of school through September 30th, or the end of September, whatever day it falls on that for our campus school day. The second cycle, and that's the self-reflection cycle. The second cycle, cycle 2, which is teacher-led goals, that goes from October through mid-November. We do about 6 to 8 weeks roughly for each cycle. So it goes from October to about mid-November. And then the last cycle happens end of November through the beginning of January or the end or the middle, early part of February. And we do this second semester. It goes through the second semester, but the early part of the second semester. And we have this timeline on purpose because we want our students to reap the benefits of improved instruction. So we go through our coaching cycles fairly early in the year, and we continue coaching if we need to. Honestly, I got a video from a teacher who I'm not coaching. I'm not her coach, but that's the level of trust that we have on this campus. She wanted to send me a video of something or of an instructional practice she was trying or implementing in her classroom. I got a video this week. So they send us videos all throughout the year. And they'll put comments, and they'll use the timestamp comment feature, and they'll put comments on the platform, and I respond back, and we just communicate that way. So although we end our cycle in February or late January, the video coaching process continues because the teachers are so willing to send us feedback.
That really speaks to a couple of things. First of all is, I think as a profession, we crave feedback. And so you've got the system where it's really fairly easy to submit a video and get the feedback. And that's exciting to see that happens really organically on the part of the teacher, even though they no longer have to or required to or asked to, they continue to. So that's great. So one last thing before we leave this timeline is, how important is it that the leadership team sit down and put these things on the calendar?
It is imperative that we put these on the calendar. What I didn't mention is we do expect that within 48 hours of capturing a video of a lesson, that the teacher receives feedback. Because if you wait, even though they have the video, it is important to be timely with the feedback. So within 48 hours, we provide feedback to the teachers, and within 1 week of having the recording the video, we sit down for the post-video conference. Timeliness is important. So we calibrated together as a leadership team, even to develop our timeline, and so that it doesn't interfere with all the other things. So because it's so important, we want to make sure that we give it time and attention and not allow it to interfere with evaluations or timelines for things of that nature. So we set this timeline purposefully.
Very nice. Thank you so much. And let's continue looking at this particular objective. And Melissa, I'm going to ask you to lead the way here a little bit as we talk about the value that as an administrator / coach you find in that coaching cycle 1. For those who haven't been with us on previous webinars, would you talk a little bit about the structure that's associated with the cycle 1 process, and then tell us the value that you find in it?
Sure. Our first coaching cycle involves teachers recording themselves and then uploading that video to their workspace. And it's private, it's not shared with their coach. And they then go through and post their own noticings and self-reflections. And what I appreciate this is that it aligns so closely with what Lydia shared earlier, that is a philosophy of ours, in which we say teachers want to do their best. They want to be their best. And this first coaching cycle kind of honors that belief and gives them an opportunity to record themselves, post their own thoughts and feedback, and kind of prepare themselves a little bit for what they want to talk about in the next coaching cycle.
Very nice. Lydia, do you want to add anything to what Melissa said?
Well, I think once the teacher gets
beyond the initial shock of what they look like and sound like on video, then they're able to sit down and reflect. They ask questions of themselves like, why did I do that? Was that very purposeful? Did that, did it happen the way I intended for it to happen? Did it have the impact that I wanted it to have? And they begin to reflect. And because they see themselves, they then value what video coaching brings to how it's improving instruction. So as an administrator, I see this cycle as gaining teacher buy-in without me having to do the hard work. They see the impact that it's having, so then now they're open to the remaining process of the video coaching.
Dr. Goree, do you want to add anything to what your APs have said?
Well, what I want to add is using the SIBME analytics feature, it allows me to see when a teacher has uploaded a video. And I will tell you that in this self-reflection phase, we only ask for one self-reflection video in cycle 1, but you'll see 2, 3, sometimes 4 videos uploaded because they are constantly tweaking and adding or making adjustments. The teachers do a lot. Self-reflection is one of the greatest forms of professional growth. They watch their videos. They'll see something that they didn't like that they want to change. They will record it again and again, and that's what the professional growth happens.
Thank you. So really important cycle, and it's exciting that you start with that cycle. And as Lydia said, they do a lot of the heavy lifting themselves in that cycle, and probably are walking away selecting that goal that they want to share with their coach. And just to ask this question is, during that self-reflection cycle, are they free reflecting, or are they given some guidance on what to reflect about?
We give them a list of guiding questions that they can use as a springboard, and I think that really helps some of our less experienced teachers. Teachers that are further along in the developmental process kind of sometimes steer the reflections in their own direction, which is perfectly fine.
All right, very good. So let's go ahead and open this up to the chat right now and see if anyone has any questions about coaching cycle 1. We do have a question, and I'm going to share this out. And again, Dr. Goree, you can decide if you want to take it or if you want to share it with one of your APs. So here's the question. Are teachers given time to complete this work, or are they just supposed to complete it with everything else that they have on their plates?
Well, Lydia described the difference between the flip cam and the SIBME platform when she came back to Sci-Fair. Teachers, it's as simple as popping up an iOS or an Android device in the classroom and recording it. The SIBME platform allows them to watch the video anywhere because it is a web-based platform. So teachers can watch the video at home, they can watch it at school, whenever they choose to. So it is not seen as a daunting task for our staff. And it wasn't that way with my staff at my previous campus either. Teachers on both campuses have been very receptive to this process because they understand the benefits that are available to them by using video enhanced coaching and doing the self-reflective piece. Sure.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Anybody else have questions about coaching cycle 1? And we're going to move on to the next, our next objective, which is objective 5. So for objective 5, we're looking at understanding coaching cycle 2. This is where the teacher has self-selected a goal and they're sharing that goal with their coach and they're working through that together. So Lydia, I'm going to ask you to start us off with objective 5 and coaching cycle 2. And just like we did with Melissa, for those who haven't been on the webinars before with us, it's important for them to understand first the process, I guess, of coaching cycle 2. And then if you could share with us the value that you see in that process.
Okay. During the 5 weeks of cycle 2, the teacher and the coach meet to discuss the teacher's goal and the focus for the video reflection. The teacher has had the opportunity to see their classroom through the lens of SIBME cycle 1, which was the teacher reflection, and they know their areas for refinement. So allowing the teacher to select the goal continues to build the trust, as we discussed earlier, and it gives value to what the teacher has as their perspective for their own professional growth plan. The teacher is vested in the attainment of the growth that they expect to see, and so therefore they're open to feedback and prompting concerning the goal that they have selected. As an administrator, I value this cycle because it gives me insight to what the teacher wants to see and what they want to accomplish in their classroom. So I'm able to then be a resource for them as we work together to prepare successfully delivered lessons. And then through the planning and the exploring of instructional strategies, discussing what the classroom environment will look like as far as student engagement and classroom management, we are able to then video the lesson, upload it to a huddle, and then begin to analyze it, to give immediate data-driven dialogue between the coach and the teacher based on what we're seeing in the video, and then the implemented practices that we saw. So this dialogue component of the SIBME platform further develops the teacher's ability to self-reflect.
Thank you. Melissa, do you want to add anything to what Lydia said?
This coaching cycle in particular really mirrors what it is we want teachers to do with their classrooms, which is make learning relevant. We always say the kids have to see a need for what they're learning in order to retain it. And so by allowing teachers to select their own goal in this cycle, you're ensuring that it's relevant to them and you're getting a greater buy-in as a result.
Absolutely. Dr. Goree, do you want to add anything?
This is also one of the stages that we calibrated on, just to make sure that we were able to help teachers who were unable to create a goal that was measurable or that would impact instruction in the way that we needed it to, or that was aligned with our campus goals. So that may be something that the coaching team has to calibrate on, is how to effectively impact the process of cycle 2.
Mm-hmm. So important, making sure that even though the teacher has the ability to self-select that goal, I'm sure that there are, all goals are not created equal. So how do we guide a teacher who maybe has selected a goal that is not aligned with your instructional guarantees, that's not aligned with the guiding questions that we've asked, and that we think at the end of the day isn't going to really impact student achievement? And so that's something that y'all work on and talk about and have as part of that conversation when you're calibrating.
Yeah.
So do we have any questions about coaching cycle 2? If you do, please enter them in the chat, or about any part of the webinar so far, any of the objectives that we've covered so far. If not, we're going to go ahead and power on to objective number 6. And so objective number 6 is dealing with coaching cycle 3. Coaching cycle 3 now is where the coach is going to select the goal. And Dr. Goree, if you would, this is perhaps one of the objectives we can work through a little bit more quickly. Would you take us through objective 6, coaching cycle 3?
Coaching cycle 2 and 3 are almost identical with 2 differences. In coaching cycle 3, the coach selects the goal. We've had enough time with the teacher. We've observed in the classroom. We've talked to the teacher about their findings of their self-reflection video. And at that point, we are ready to select a goal to work on with the teacher. And the second difference is coaching cycle 3 is unscheduled. We don't set, in coaching cycle 2, the teacher picks the date and the time for us to come in. Coaching cycle 3, we tell them we'll be in within the next 2 weeks at this particular window of time. So it is an unscheduled visit.
Right. So there's this gradual release that takes place throughout these 3 coaching cycles, essentially, and that's really powerful, and one of the reasons that it is so powerful. So do we have any questions about any of the previous objectives or objective 6, coaching cycle 3? If so, please enter them in the chat. If not, we're going to power on to objective number 7. So as we were planning for today's webinar, the assistant principals were excited to talk about some of the ways that videos being used at their campus beyond the coaching cycles, and actually some ways that teachers have started to think about using video as well. So Melissa, let's start with you. Talk with us about some of the things that you find exciting beyond the coaching model.
So when we had teachers who needed to experience some professional growth by going to observe someone else, in the past, it was always a little bit of a scheduling, juggling act, because we would have to find coverage for that teacher's class. Usually our instructional specialist would accompany them to go somewhere to another campus or another teacher, and that meant that instructional specialist missed planning. So there were a whole lot of layers to getting a teacher the opportunity to observe someone else in action. through SIBME, we're able to record another teacher in the building, share it in a huddle with a third teacher, and then give them that opportunity to observe instruction without having to do the juggling of covering a schedule. And we also have a video library feature in SIBME, which allows us to focus on certain initiatives and post videos that align with that in that video library to help teachers grow. For example, we were working really hard on how to prepare our students to move up in their early reading levels, those kindergartners who were learning early reading behaviors, who were trying really hard to meet their needs and get them reading. And so we were able to post videos of really strong lessons that aligned with that so that teachers could go in and watch and get some new ideas.
Thank you. Lydia, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, another way that we use our video library on our professional development days, those that were not taken by hurricane or ice days, we were able to have shared breakout sessions. So some of our teachers, our teacher leaders, would go and present, and if you weren't able to select their session because you were interested in another session at the same time, it was being videoed. So all sessions were uploaded to the video library, and at a later time, the teachers could go and view the missed session that also was of interest to them. Our instructional specialists also use the SIBME platform for professional growth because they video planning, and we have certain guidelines that we have for planning. So they video their planning, and then they share it in a huddle with another instructional specialist who will then give them feedback on their planning session for their professional growth and development.
Thank you. Dr. Goree, do you want to add anything to what the APs have said?
Our comfort level has grown over the course of the years using the SIBME platform. We were not using the library the first year. We were strictly using it for coaching and self-reflection. But because we've developed a comfort level, we now use more and more of the features, and this one has definitely been beneficial to our campus.
Thank you. So I would just say this is for those who are listening and maybe first-time listeners even, is, as Dr. Goree said, this is something that, and we at SIBME see it as really almost a 3-year process. That the first year that you use video, it's going to be maybe very focused on self-reflection and coaching. And then in year 2, you can plan on adding a little bit, as Melissa used the word, layers to that makes sense along the way. Trying to do everything that first year might be a little bit more daunting. So being very intentional and maybe even creating a 3-year plan. And I know, and I'm excited for webinar 9, because I know that you're going to be unveiling some of the layers you plan on adding next year to the way that you're using video at your campus. But we'll wait until webinar 9 to talk more about that. So let's go ahead and have our final opportunity here for chatting. Any questions about the content that we've covered here today? We have covered a lot of content, and we've covered it really interestingly through the lens of the assistant principals who really wear 2 hats at Franconia, the hat of a coach and the hat of an evaluator. Always, though, the lines never cross, always evaluating folks that they do not coach and coaching folks that they do not evaluate. And I have to say, as we're waiting for folks to enter into the chat here, I would love being, and I know a lot of folks who would love being an assistant principal at your school, Dr. Goree, because they have the ability to keep their instructional chops sometimes. And Melissa used the word assistant principals get caught up in the procedural things, and they aren't used as much for instruction. But at your campus, they're sharpening that, they're continuing to sharpen that saw, which I'm sure is a daunting task for them, but it looks like it's pretty rewarding as well. So we do have a question in the chat, and the question is, when is your book coming out?
That's all I can say.
Okay.
I've heard that question. I've gotten that question before.
All right. I think that Justin is trying to plant a seed there, and maybe you should see if that's going to grow. So our next webinar is webinar 9. That is going to be the last of the 9-part webinar series that's scheduled for May the 17th. We hope that you'll come back and join us. Right now we have 2 objectives. We're going to work on maybe adding a few more objectives to webinar 9. And if you have something you want us to be sure we cover in webinar 9, it'd be great for us to have you make those suggestions. You could suggest those in the chat as well. But the objectives we have so far is Dr. Goree is just going to give us that big overview in terms of, again, once more, all the cycles and how we walk through those, but also she's going to unveil some of the innovations that are planned for next school year. So we do have a question at this point before we move forward, and here it is. The coaching you do is clearly closely linked to school values and areas of progress. Does this leave much time for teachers and coaches to address new or innovative areas that may not fit into current issues?
Anyone want to take that?
Sure. Oh, go ahead.
Well, our coaching process focuses on our campus goals, our campus initiatives. We pride ourselves in being forward thinkers and making sure that we're not stagnant in our practices. So each year, as Melissa used the word layers, we add layers to what we do. Everything is purposeful. Everything is done for the purpose of improving instruction, improving academic performance, and the academic performance of our students. We pride our teachers on their being creative and bringing in ideas and resources that will help support classroom instruction. So it's not a lockstep process. The coaching process is just built in to enhance what they're currently doing, making sure that those practices are being implemented in a way that students will benefit and maximize instruction.
Thank you. Great answer. Really is all about, at the end of the day, student achievement.
Melissa,
so let's continue.
Melissa, add something to that?
Melissa, yes.
Okay, one of the things that I think is so valuable about where we currently are as a campus is that there's a clear vision every school year for what it is we're working towards. And teachers like to know where the bar is. They like to know what it is they're working towards. And by tying in our video coaching with our book studies and our initiatives that year, it really does help them to have clarity. And district-wide, that's one of our focuses this year. And I think that teachers appreciate knowing what it is we're working towards.
Nice. The old expression, it's hard to hit a moving target. So it's important to have that clarity and keep that focus and have that purpose. So we do have another question in the chat. So it's just thanking you. What a great team. I would love to come to visit your school. That's what the panelists said. So on we go. We have some homework for those of you who are listening today. If you are thinking about implementing video into next year's school year or thinking about maybe piloting for this year, either way, we have some homework based on the work we did today. Dr. Goree, would you walk them through the homework steps?
Absolutely. The first bullet is about calibration. It is so important, as you heard today, that the team is aligned, that they don't bring in past perceptions or experiences to the process that are not focused on improving instruction on that particular campus. And then start planning your timeline. What's your calendar going to look like? We end ours pretty early because we want the students to reap the benefits of all that coaching that happens. So take a look at your timeline and what will that look like for the 2018-2019 school year.
Thank you. And Dr. Goree, just so that we all understand, when will you sit down with your leadership team and start looking at the 2018-2019 calendar and start to intentionally put your video cycles on that calendar?
We start I'm back in July, and I pull them in at some point in July, and we start working on our calendar and putting that information on the calendar early so that teachers are aware and every coach is aware of what that timeline is so that we can implement it with fidelity.
Very nice. So I always like to give the folks who joined us on the webinar the opportunity to talk about what resonated most with you regarding today's webinar. I also see this as an opportunity to really give thanks and show some gratitude to the Dr. Goree and to Melissa and Lydia, who've taken time out to be with us today and to do a rehearsal with me earlier this week, and to really think and be very thoughtful about what they wanted to say and what objectives they wanted to cover today. So if you would please let us know what resonated with you regarding the content of today's webinar. It's a way of, I think, thanking the folks who've joined us in the webinar today by letting them know that. And I have excellent wait times, so we'll wait for some folks to let us know. And while that's happening, I do want you to know you can contact us at CIBME. You can let us know if you have any questions that you'd like for us to follow up on. We'd love to hear from you. We also have a free trial that you can sign up for, and we would love for you to do that. We'd love for you to take the opportunity before the end of this school year to become more familiar with the platform, and you can do that by signing up for the free trial. So no one has entered anything into the chat in terms of what resonated with them. So I'm going to just end the webinar today by thanking both Lydia. Oh, we do have somebody. By thanking Lydia and by thanking Melissa and by always thanking Dr. Goree for taking the time out today to be with us. And so I do have a couple of folks who are going to tell us what resonated with them. So this is a resonation. The component that most resonated with me was the clear and focused timeline of action steps. And that's no surprise. It's important to have that on the calendar. And the other resonation for me, I really have felt the strength and unity of the leadership team. And in the last webinar, they felt the strength and unity with the teachers, which is really important. And then we have a thank you from Justin. Thanks, Francone team. It really all came together today. It sure did, from the lens of the administrators/coaches. So once again, thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and end today's webinar. We hope you can join us for the 9th webinar of the 9-part webinar series in May. Thank you all very much.